We all walk, right? But have you ever stopped to wonder why humans, for thousands of years, have felt this deep, almost primal urge to go on these long, sometimes grueling journeys on foot? I'm talking about everything from ancient pilgrimages to a simple long-distance hike. Well, it turns out there's a universal pattern here, and the reason for it is probably not what you think.
This quote right here is the explosive idea at the heart of what we're talking about today. It completely flips the script on the entire history of spiritual journeys. It suggests that the profound clarity, the meaning people find on the road, well, that isn't the goal of the walk at all. It's an inevitable side effect of the physical act itself.
So this is the central mystery. Seriously, think about it. Why does this exact same practice, the long walk, pop up in almost every single culture we know of, throughout all of history? We've always been told it's about a search for God or for meaning. But what if the answer has nothing to do with our beliefs and everything to do with how our brains are wired?
Okay, first, let's just take a second to appreciate the sheer scale of this thing. It's a pattern that's so common, so universal, that it's almost hidden in plain sight. I mean, just look at this list. You see it everywhere, all across the globe, from the famous Shikoku pilgrimage in Japan to wandering Buddhist monks, Christian pilgrimage routes, the Hajj in Islam, even all the way back to our nomadic hunter-gatherer ancestors. The beliefs and the cultures attached to these journeys are wildly different. But the physical act? It's bizarrely, almost spookily consistent. So, what is really going on here?
And when you actually break it down, the pattern gets even sharper. So forget about the specific religions for a second. The mechanics are always the same. It's always long distance, we're talking days or weeks. It's low intensity, just repetitive walking. There are no performance goals, right? You're not trying to set a speed record. And you're doing it through a constantly changing environment. This shared blueprint, it's a huge clue that we're looking at something biological, not just cultural.
All right, so this brings us to the core thesis, and this is where we really turn centuries of thinking on its head. The argument is that we've had the cause and effect completely backwards this whole time. Here it is, the big idea. The act of long-distance walking physically changes the baseline state of your brain. It's an automatic, neurological process. You don't have to believe in anything for it to happen. That feeling of enlightenment or clarity, that's not something you find at the end of the trail. It's a mental state your brain is forced into by the simple act of walking. The belief, the religion, the spirituality, that's just the story we tell ourselves about that feeling after it happens.
So how does this neurological reboot actually work? Let's pop the hood and take a look at your brain on walking.
You have to remember, for 99% of our species history, our brains evolved while our bodies were in almost constant motion. Walking wasn't exercise, it was our default state of being. You could say the human brain is literally designed to function best while moving. Sitting still all day in a fixed environment, from an evolutionary perspective, that's a very, very recent and frankly, very weird thing for us to be doing.
Now this brings us to a really key part of your brain, the default mode network, or the DMN. The best way to think about it is as your brain's internal narrator, that little voice in your head. It's what kicks in when you're just sitting there, not doing much, rehashing old arguments, worrying about the future, thinking about yourself. And in our modern sedentary world, this network is often hyperactive, which leads to that constant, looping anxiety and overthinking so many of us feel.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the typical sedentary brain. That DMN is in overdrive, just lost in thought. But when you start that long-distance walk, something incredible happens. The DMN quiets right down. Your brain shifts its resources away from that internal chatter and toward processing all the sensory information coming in from the world. That overactive narrator, it finally goes silent. You're just present.
Now you might be thinking, hey, this sounds a lot like meditation. But here's the thing, neurologically, it's totally different. Sitting meditation is a top-down, cognitive effort. You're trying to control your internal state. Walking is an automatic bottom-up process. It's driven by external data. And there are two key inputs, optic flow, that's the stream of visual info moving past you, and vestibular input, which is your sense of balance from your inner ear. These physical inputs actively shut down the DMN in a way that just sitting still can't.
And here's the punchline. The mental quiet you feel isn't something you achieve with willpower. It's that your brain is so busy processing the walk, the movement, the sights, the sounds, maintaining balance, that it literally doesn't have the cognitive resources left to keep that self-referential, anxious thinking going. Your brain is just too occupied with the present moment to worry about anything else.
Okay, so if this is all a biological process, a neurological quirk, then where did all the religion and philosophy come from?
Well, that leads us to a whole new way of looking at history, seeing religion as a form of documentation.
It probably happens something like this. First, people just observed it. They noticed that this specific activity, walking for a really long time, reliably made them feel this incredibly quiet, stable, peaceful way. Then, leaders or thinkers came along and structured this observation into organized rituals, things we now call pilgrimages. And finally, they had to explain the profound feeling it created. So, they used the best language they had at the time, the language of God, spirits, and salvation. Religion didn't invent the practice. It just found a way to document and interpret a pre-existing human experience.
So all of these powerful spiritual concepts, enlightenment, salvation, feeling a divine presence, you can think of them as labels. They're the names that our complex, language-driven minds came up with to describe the afterimage of a brain that has been temporarily returned to its quiet, natural state. The silence felt so unusual, so profound compared to normal life, that it had to be something supernatural.
Okay, this is a fascinating way to look at history for sure. But what's the takeaway for us, today, living in our hyper-connected, constantly overstimulated world? Why does this matter more than ever?
This chart really says it all. The baseline level of mental noise in the ancient world was just so much lower than what we deal with. For us today, living with a fire hose of information, notifications, and distractions, the shift from our chaotic normal brain to the quiet walk-in brain is way more dramatic. The contrast is just immense, and that's why these practices can feel so powerful and so necessary for us.
So this brings us to a complete redefinition. A pilgrimage, or any long walk, isn't really about moral training or being obedient to a faith. At its absolute core, it is neural baseline restoration. It's a way to reboot your brain and return it to the original operating system our species was designed to run on. And that leaves us with this final thought. Maybe enlightenment isn't some lofty goal to be achieved. Maybe it's just the silence that's been there all along. The answer was never really at the end of the road. The answer was the road. Thanks for joining us.